This morning we'll be looking at John chapter 6, verses 25 through 59. I know it's kind of a long passage, but it's kind of an important one because we are switching gears a little bit as we enter the season of Lent, and we are beginning a new series on some of the statements Jesus made during his ministry. And these statements Jesus makes are leading up to his betrayal and crucifixion. And so he says some profound things about himself. And these statements help us during the season of Lent as we seek to examine our lives and see where God needs to be allowed into our lives as we strive to recommit ourselves to God and his will. And so for each of these statements, we'll be turning to the Gospel of John. And the reason why we're looking at the Gospel of John is because John gives us probably the most details regarding Jesus' teachings. And it is here where we find Jesus giving his I am statements. And each I am statement Jesus makes is about calling us to him, to examine if we are recognizing him in our lives, and if we are not, then how do we find our way back to him? Seems very appropriate for this season of Lent. So if you'll turn to John chapter 6, verses 25 through 59. When they had found him on the other side of the lake, they asked him, "Rabbi, when did you get here?" Jesus answered, "Very truly I tell you, you are looking for me not because you saw signs I performed, but because you ate loaves and had your fill. Do not work for food that spoils, but for food that endures to eternal life, which the Son of Man will give for you. For on him God the Father has placed his seal of approval." Then they asked him, "What must we do to do the works God requires?" Jesus answered, "The work of God is this, to believe in the one who has sent him." So they asked him, "What sign then will you give that we may see it and believe you? What will you do? Our ancestors ate the manna in the wilderness, as it is written, he gave them bread from heaven to eat." Jesus said to them, "Very truly I tell you, it is not Moses who has given you the bread from heaven, but it is my Father who gives you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is the bread that comes down from heaven and gives life to the world." "Sir," they replied, "always give us this bread." Then Jesus declared, "I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. But as I told you, you have seen me, and still you do not believe. All those the Father gives me will come to me, and whoever comes to me I will never drive away. For I have come down from heaven not to do my will, but to do the will of him who sent me. And this is the will of him who sent me, that I shall lose none of those he has given me, but raise them up at the last day. My Father's will is that everyone who looks to the Son and believes in him shall have eternal life, and I will raise them up at the last day." At this, the Jews began to grumble about him, because he said, "I am the bread that came down from heaven." They said, "Is this not Jesus, the son of Joseph, whose father and mother we know? How can he now say, 'I came down from heaven'?" "Stop grumbling amongst yourselves," Jesus answered. "No one can come to me unless the Father who sent me draws them, and I will raise them up at the last day. It is written in the prophets, they will all be taught by God. Everyone who has heard the Father and learned from him comes to me. No one has seen the Father except the one who is from God. Only he has seen the Father. Very truly I tell you, the one who believes has eternal life. I am the bread of life. Your ancestors ate the manna in the wilderness, yet they died. But here is the bread that comes down from heaven, which anyone may eat and not die. I am the living bread that came down from heaven. Whoever eats eats this bread will live forever. This bread is my flesh, which I will give for the life of the world." Then the Jews began to argue sharply amongst themselves, "How can this man give us his flesh to eat?" Jesus said to them, "Very truly I tell you, unless you eat the flesh of man, of the Son of Man, and drink his blood, you will have no life in you. Whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life, and I will raise them up at the last day. For my flesh is real food, and my blood is real drink. Whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood remains in me, and I in them. Just as the living Father sent me, I live because of the Father. So the one who feeds on me will live because of me. This is the bread that came down from heaven. Your ancestors ate manna and died, but whoever feeds on this bread will live forever." And he said this while teaching in the synagogue of Capernaum. May the Lord bless the reading of his holy word. Now I know the passage that we just read is a long one, but when Jesus says, "I am the bread of life," there is a lot to unpack here. And Jesus gives us a great understanding of why he is the bread of life. This is a wonderful statement about Jesus and about the one who sent him. So what leads to Jesus making this statement happens a few verses ago in the previous chapter. Jesus, the previous day, had just fed 5,000 with 5 loaves and 2 fish. And they ate their fill and were satisfied. And so while they were resting, he left and went to the other side of the lake to Capernaum. And there the crowd that had followed him realized that he had not arrived there, and so they come to him and they ask him the question, "When did you get here? For we did not know you had come." And so as Jesus teaching in the synagogue of Capernaum, that Jesus makes this profound statement, "I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty." And so he makes this profound statement. So before we go into Jesus' profound statement, "I am the bread of life," you need to understand something. Not more so understand, but I'm more along the lines of I have a confession to make. And this is my confession before we look at such a powerful statement of Jesus. And the first is, the Gospel of John is one of my favorite books of the Bible. I just love what John reveals in his writing, in his Gospel, about Jesus and his teaching. And because of this, I took a semester of my undergraduate degree was dedicated to studying the Gospel of John. And so my love of John's writing is really deep. So understand, that's one of my confessions. The second confession before we look into why Jesus said, "I am the bread of life," is that we are going to talk about a